Hello everyone, welcome to Science Teatime. My name is Spencer and I am a PhD student and mycologist who studies fungal parasites of humans and other mammals. Like millions of other people, I have been watching The Last of Us, a show about the zombie fungus cordyceps causing the apocalypse pandemic. And because I study fungal pathogens for a living, I have a lot of feelings about the science on the show. Mostly negative feelings. So today I'm gonna make some tea and tell you about everything wrong with the mycology on The Last of Us Season 1. So before I begin, I want to clarify that I mean no hate towards the writers or consultants on The Last of Us whatsoever. I think as human storytelling, it is a remarkable show that I really enjoy. But I feel like they present a veneer of scientific accuracy, opening with a debate between two scientists featuring a prominent mycologist, and I kind of want to challenge that a little bit. I think that people's curiosity that could arise about mycology because of the show should be met by actual science and some real-world examples of the neat fungi that are out there. So let's get started with problem number 1. So to be honest, I was irritated instantly by The Last of Us. All it took was the title sequence. Ooh, what is this? Nice yellow organism growing on stuff? Sure looks creepy and fungal. Except it's not a fungus, it's a slime mold! This is 1000% a slime mold. It's confusing because slime mold has the word mold in it, and mold usually is fungal, but slime molds are not remotely on the same branch of the tree of life as fungi. Slime molds are in this group called protists. Protists are diverse lineages of eukaryotes, or organisms that have nuclei in their cells. And basically any eukaryote that is not a plant, animal, or fungus is a protist. Any resemblance between slime molds and fungi is superficial. Now, slime molds are interesting protists. They transition between being single-celled organisms and joining together to form multicellular organisms. Sort of like all the Zords and Power Rangers joining together to become Megazord. So some scientists study slime molds to understand how multicellular life evolved from single-celled life. But again, and I cannot emphasize this enough, slime molds are not fungi, which is odd considering this is a show about the fungus apocalypse. Now, I would have forgiven this if it were just an artistic choice made for the title sequence, but this problem just gets worse and worse in this show. Ostensibly, this is a show about cordyceps, the real-life zombie ant fungus. But what is this? It's growing out of zombies. It's growing out of dead bodies. It's growing giant all over the buildings. And it sure looks a heck of a lot like Ganoderma. This is Ganoderma, commonly called reishi, which you may have heard before. You're probably noticing that Ganoderma and cordyceps are two different words. And they're not at all similar. Ganoderma are perfectly innocuous mushrooms. They grow on trees and dead wood. They're nothing to fear, and they're certainly not going to cause the apocalypse. In fact, reishi are used in traditional medicine in many cultures. This just makes me so mad. I worry that this is going to stoke what we call mycophobia, or fear of fungus. It's this idea that all fungi are gross. They're the things that grow mold on your bread or cause an itchy rash on your skin. Many people are disgusted by fungus and reluctant to interact with mushrooms because of it, even though there is no mushroom that is dangerous to touch. Fun fact. On the contrary, fungi are essential to life as we know it. The world would not function without fungi being decomposers and providing many other ecosystem services. Many are beneficial to humans. I mean, we got penicillin from a fungus. We shouldn't be vilifying innocent mushrooms like Ganoderma. So I like that The Last of Us is igniting people's curiosity about mycology, but I also fear that it's feeding into the revulsion people feel towards these essential organisms. Cookie sidebar. The zombie ant fungus that captured public attention is commonly called cordyceps, but is actually in a closely related genus, Ophiocordyceps. The species is named Ophiocordyceps unilateralis. The cordyceps fungus in The Last of Us is quite animated. It literally moves around. It forms these tentacles that come out of people's mouths and infect people with fungus, or the underground mycelium rises up and taps zombies to get their attention. Now, this one is obviously wrong and just kind of silly. I've never seen a mushroom grow arms and tap me on the shoulder. Mycelium does move in the sense that it grows. This is a slow process that you're not going to see wiggling around like some kind of Lovecraft monster. But I bring it up because there are some interesting examples of rapid movement outside of the animal kingdom. Think of a Venus flytrap closing to catch a fly. Some fungi can move like this too. One is earth stars in the genus Astraeus. These are puffball-like mushrooms with a round chamber of spores that can puff out so that they're spread on the wind. But notice these star-shaped rays surrounding the central puffball. These rays are hygroscopic, which means that they can absorb and react to water. So when conditions are dry, the rays shrivel up and enclose the central puffball, protecting the spores. But when it gets wet and humid outside, which is the environment the spores can germinate in, the rays open up and release them, giving the spores an optimal start at life. Another example is that some mushrooms are actually hunters. Nematode hunters, that is. Similar to Venus flytraps, they need supplemental nitrogen that they're not getting from their substrate. Some of these mushrooms have sticky mycelium that nematodes will stick to before being digested. But a few species, including Arthrobotrys, have specialized miniature rings that trap nematodes like a lasso. And when a nematode enters one of these rings, they constrict like a trap. This happens through changes in osmotic pressure and is just absolutely wild. Okay, hear me out. Cordyceps fungi grow from spores. Spores are produced on fungal fruiting bodies. The zombies in The Last of Us have fruiting bodies that grow out of their heads. So they infect new people by biting them. I'm sorry, am I reading this right? So fruiting bodies are the fungal reproductive structure, sort of like an apple is to a tree. They grow from the underlying mycelium to create and spread spores. Mushrooms are an example of a fruiting body, and cordyceps produces them too. Except apparently these ones on the show don't do anything because people need to be bitten to get infected. Just cosmetic fashion mushrooms. I guess the fungus is being spread through some asexual reproduction directly through the bite, like the mycelium fragmenting off and entering the new host and growing there. This one is just odd to me because the Ophiocordyceps zombie ant fungus itself is famous because of the zombie behavior in which the ants are forced to crawl into the leaf canopy and latch onto a leaf in a death grip until a fruiting body bursts out of their heads so that the spores can be spread at the perfect height, far and wide throughout the forest. Now, I haven't played the Last of Us video game, but I've been told that the biting wasn't so much of a thing there. The spores actually were a problem, with people wearing masks to protect themselves and stuff like that. I do see why this wouldn't work on a television show because we want to see the actors' faces. And it does create a bit of a plot hole. If the spores were just in the air everywhere, why would the zombies need to chase you down? The air will just infect you for them. But I think they could have incorporated spores without that plot hole. Not all fungal spores can travel long distances and stay viable for long periods of time. The fungi that I study are called pneumocystis. They are lung parasites that live in the lungs of humans and other mammals, and they don't do well outside the lung. You basically have to be breathing or coughing in someone's face to transmit it. And maybe this cordyceps species is like that. If I were to rewrite it, I would have it be like, the zombie chases you down, grabs your head, draws its face towards yours, and then the fruiting body emerges and puffs spores right in your face. Sort of a Dementor's Kiss meets alien xenomorph situation. Cookie sidebar. Here are images of the largest mushroom in North America, Mycology titans, and the largest mushroom in the world, Termitomyces titanicus, found in West Africa. So remember how I just said that it would be really weird if in The Last of Us the spores were in the air everywhere because then there would be no need for the zombies to chase us down and attack us to spread the fungus? Yeah, me too. So how weird is it that this fungus seems to be growing and doing just fine wherever? Why bother making humans go all aggro when you can produce giant fruiting bodies on every building in Boston, apparently? Oh, and another slime mold. Just couldn't help but notice that. So I want to introduce the concept of an obligate parasite. An obligate parasite is any parasite that absolutely must infect a living host in order to survive and reproduce. It cannot survive any other way. And it's these types of parasites that have the most extreme specialized adaptations to their hosts, such as altering their behavior and turning them into zombies that do their bidding. And cordyceps fungi are indeed obligate parasites. They can only grow on insects, and different cordyceps species are highly specialized towards particular insects, like in this reel from planet Earth. If they don't infect a bug, they cannot reproduce, so it is essential for them to get passed on. That's why there's a lot of evolutionary pressure to develop these unique host adaptations to maximize successful transmission. Obligate parasitism is on the other end of the spectrum from something called saprotrophy, which means rotten food eating. Saprotrophs survive on dead matter like wood, soil, the sides of buildings. There's not any evolutionary pressure for them to manipulate the behavior of animals because what difference does it make to them? They can spread their spores just chilling on a log or whatever. So it's really bizarre to see this obligate parasite with dramatic adaptations to alter human behavior have a saprotrophic stage just growing anywhere. And apparently reproducing, I mean there's fruiting bodies every time. You really wouldn't see something like this in an obligate parasitic fungus in nature. Cookie sidebar, fungi are much more closely related to animals than they are to plants. Or slime molds. Phylogenies, baby. Okay, Okay, now we get into the bread and butter of what I am most mad about in this show. And this is the fact that in The Last of Us, the cordyceps pathogen started out infecting ants, then moved into wheat apparently, and then into humans? And it was already perfectly adapted to playing the human mind like a well-tuned violin. The main goal of my research with pneumocystis is to understand how parasites and pathogens evolve to infect new hosts. So this is a subject that's very near and dear to my heart. It's also been on a lot of people's minds because of COVID, a virus that may have jumped into humans from bats. When a pathogen manages to infect a new host like this, it's called a host range expansion, or more commonly just a host switch. So let's think about this. Like I said before, each cordyceps species is specific to a particular insect, and that arises because of an evolutionary arms race between parasites and their hosts. Think of the anti-parasite defenses of every organism, such as the immune system, as a really complicated lock. And parasites must evolve over time to become perfect keys to crack these locks and infect their hosts. Oh, and the locks are also changing through time to better keep out the keys. Evolution. This often leads to a diverse array of hosts matched by many perfect parasitic keys. And highly specialty keys usually aren't going to fit into other locks. This is what we call host specificity. But sometimes the keys can fit into other locks, maybe because the locks are similar in some way. And when a parasite successfully colonizes a new host, this is that host switch. Often host switching is more common between closely related species. Like members of a family might be similar, so too are species that are related to one another. And we see this in the fact that almost all cordyceps are entomopathogens, or parasites of insects. They stick to this host group. Now, host jumps between dissimilar, unrelated species do occur. A few cordyceps species are actually mycoparasites, or parasites of other fungi, for example. But this is more uncommon, and parasites probably aren't going to be perfectly pre-adapted to their new host right away. They might be able to turn the lock, but it's a little sticky. A zombie ant fungus couldn't control the mind of an alligator, for example. Or a human. Weird. It might just give them a nasty skin or lung infection if it did manage the host switch. And The Last of Us wants us to believe that a big host switch happened not only once, but twice. Ellie asks Joel in one episode how the entire world got infected, proposing that it had jumped from monkeys into humans. And Joel explains that cordyceps started growing in the world's wheat supply and then jumped into humans from there. Note that wheat is a plant, an entirely different kingdom of life. No known species of cordyceps parasitizes plants, just FYI. So the show is asking us to believe that cordyceps first jumped into plants, grew all over the world's wheat like a champ, doing great, and then it started growing in humans? And not just growing in humans, but altering their minds. Much more complicated minds than those of ants, in this very specific way that makes them violent, aggressive, attack each other to spread. It's perfectly pre-adapted to its human hosts before ever even encountering them. Oh, and not only that, it also forms strange tentacle monsters and grows underground with sentient moving mycelium and can grow all over the sides of walls, and by the way, it's another friggin' slime mold! Where was the selection pressure to become this superbug when it was perfectly happy in wheat? This evolutionary story just isn't making a lot of sense. And then there came the line where I actually yelled at my TV, because the writers gave us this whole story about wheat, and then went on to have Ellie say,
"It makes more sense than monkeys."
And I literally said out loud, no it doesn't! Because to me, that would make a lot more sense. Ophiocordyceps lives in the tropical rainforest. Monkeys live there too. Note that wheat isn't exactly tropical. It makes much more sense to me that monkeys could have been exposed to Ophiocordyceps from ants, which over time evolved to infect them. And because monkeys and their minds are similar to humans, this would have made it more likely that they were pre-adapted to create zombie humans. So I'm here for the zombie monkeys rewrite. Honestly, bring it on. Let's fight zombie versions of those monkeys from episode 6. The bottom line is, fear not. Cordyceps fungi are not likely to cause the zombie apocalypse anytime soon. We have a few million years of safety left, at least. Probably, anyway. There's major scientific problems with the moral quandary in the final episode as well, but that is very spoilerific, so I think I'll save that for another video. For now, that's the tea. Irish breakfast. Thanks for watching Science Tea Time. Please let me know if you want a follow-up video about everything right with the mycology on The Last of Us Season 1. If you have any questions you want me to answer, just comment down below. I might even make a future video about it. Toodaloo.